The second peril covered under a life insurance policy is total and permanent disability. In short, we call this TPD. So what is TPD? TPD is an event whereby one is unable to perform the daily living activities and never be expected to work again. A totally and permanently disabled person has to fulfill the following conditions. Okay, so in a life insurance contract, the definition of a total and permanent disablement will be defined. And how is TPD defined? The first definition of TPD is total and irrecoverable loss of sight of both eyes. Okay, so if a person loses their eyesight, of both eyes, then that can be considered TPD. So if one eye only, then you cannot say that it is total and permanent disablement. Yeah, it has to be both eyes. The second definition is the severance of two limbs at or above the wrist or ankle. So we have limbs, we have our hands, and we have our legs. Those are our limbs. So the severance of two limbs, either both hands or both legs, okay, at or above the wrist or ankle. And the last definition of TPD is total and irrecoverable loss of sight of one eye and loss of severance of one limb at or above the wrist or ankle. So it could be the loss of one eye instead of both eyes, but it must come with the loss or severance of a limb. So maybe a person loses his or her sight of one eye and then loses the severance of a limb, like maybe the use of one arm. Okay, so it must be two. So I'll give you a visualization of a picture. Okay, so basically here, just to visualize, so it must be the loss of sight of both eyes or both limbs. So maybe the use of both hands or arms, so it must be above the wrist, so anything above lah. So two limbs, or the legs, two of them. So or it could be one eye and one limb. So this is basically just to visualize what a TPD covers, total and permanent disablement. Okay, the third peril covered under a life insurance policy is critical illnesses, and basically this coverage, will cover an insured from loss of income upon the diagnosis of one of the 36 debilitating critical illness. So there is a list of 36 critical illness that are usually used by insurance companies, and we will briefly go through that list in a bit. Okay, but I'd just like to highlight that upon doing some research, I found that AIA Malaysia started to cover 39 critical illness in July 2008. So from 36, they changed it to 39. They added 3 more different types of illness under critical illness. And Prudential Malaysia started to offer 43 critical illness in January 2019. So this is a list of all the 36 critical illness. Basically, we let's just look at some of them. So Alzheimer's disease or irreversible organic degeneration of brain disorders. So Alzheimer's disease usually happen in elderly people, where they lose their mental ability, their memory basically degenerates, and also covered under critical illness are heart-related problems like angioplasty, and other invasive treatments for major coronary artery disease, bacterial meningitis, benign brain tumor, blindness or total loss of sight, brain surgery, cancer, and so on. So deafness is also covered under here. Kidney failure, heart attack, what else? HIV due to blood transfusion, loss of speech, stroke. So stroke could relate to the inability to speak as well, and all these. This is a list of the 36 critical illnesses. So as I mentioned, AIA started to cover 39 critical illnesses since 2018. So let us briefly look at what are the additional coverage. The first one is full-blown AIDS. So I did some research and tried to find a description of AIDS. So I found this definition whereby it says that AIDS is the most advanced stage of HIV infection. If you have HIV and you are not on HIV treatment, eventually your body's immune system will weaken and you will progress to AIDS. So people with AIDS have such badly damaged immune systems that they get a number of severe illnesses. So I guess AIDS is the very end stage of HIV. Another critical illness covered is occupationally acquired HIV infection. So I think we have to understand actually how HIV is usually contracted. One way is through the sharing of needles with someone who has HIV, for example, through drug abuse. And the other one is through certain sexual activities, which I would say both these ways of contracting HIV are intentional acts which does not happen by random chance. So usually HIV is not covered, but under this new coverage of critical illness, HIV that is occupationally acquired perhaps by doctors or nurses will be covered. So the other one is SLE with severe kidney complications. Okay, so since I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not sure exactly, what are the meanings of some of these illnesses. So we do not have to memorize all of them, just to familiarize with what is a critical illness. And these are the additional 7 coverage by Prudential, which also has occupationally acquired HIV, muscular dystrophy, terminal illness, and so on and so forth. So I think what we need to understand is that these critical illnesses are usually very terminal stage illnesses that have high probability of death. So this critical illness cover can be attached as a rider on life insurance policies.